Hello, everyone, and I hope you're all enjoying Migraine Awareness Month 2021. My name is Flynn, and I'll be interviewing Rafaela today, who is the founder of Migraine Australia, so we can get to know her a little bit better and hear more about her experience of living with migraine. How are you doing, Rafaela?
Feeling a bit weird to be on this side of the questions, I got to tell you.
Yeah.
That's okay. How are you, Flynn?
I am all right. I am tired because I did Jackie earlier, but I'm on a roll.
Yeah, come back and talk to me when you do 8 in a day.
When did you start Migraine Australia, and what was your goal or vision for it when you first started it?
People think I have some vision. I really don't. Okay, so Migraine Australia started out of a petition that I did before the 2019 election. So I was working on my PhD in a very big study on the election. So I couldn't do a lot of advocacy stuff like I would normally do, like I do now. I had to be kind of really careful because I was studying the election, right? Conflict of interest, yada, yada. So I put up this quiet little petition on change.org asking both sides of politics to commit to listing AIM-A-Vig on the PBS if they won the election, which they did, right? Both of them came back with that line of, we will list everything that the PBAC recommends. Remember that one? Good line, that one. That was funny. Anyway, so after the election, I put a poll up in the AIM-A-Vig group that we all kind of came out of and said, what do you want to do now? Do you want to do another petition? Do you want to, lobby? Do you want to have a standing organization? And the group very clearly and very quickly voted for a standing patient organization. So I invited people to join the organizing committee, and there were about 8 of us on the original committee, and we kind of organized stuff for a while and just kind of talked about what we wanted to do and what our goals would be and put all of that down. We formed as a company about 6 months later and registered as a charity 6 months after that. Ta-da, we're here.
Yeah. Did you know, from any past experience, because did you work in politics or anything beforehand? What did you do for work or study? I think you said you just studied politics, but how does one start an organization? Did it grow slowly, or was it a steep learning curve? Did you have any idea what you were doing?
I've done it before is the short answer. I've done it before. So before migraine, right, BM, which is not really before migraine, but before migraine got bad, I was a professional political operative. So I ran election campaigns, I ran awareness campaigns. I got to bop all over the country, going to work on very different elections. I worked on Obama in 2008. I worked in Israel for a while. I've worked on a couple of other US campaigns, congressional campaigns, gubernatorial campaigns, as well as running the Australian Democrats here for about 1.5 years. Now, you're too young. You won't remember what the Australian Democrats were, but I'm old. So for those who are young like Flynn and not old like me, the Australian Democrats was what the Greens are now, kind of thing. They were the third way, the third party in Australian politics. They held the balance of power in Senate for a number of years. You may have heard of Natasha Stott-Despoja. She was our leader for a while. In fact, she was a leader when I got involved. I ran the party as their executive director for 18 months after they lost all of the senators. So much, kind of 10, 15 years after I first got involved with the party. But that's why I kind of knew what to do in terms of, all right, we need an organization, let's do it. We need values and goals, and we need to, I knew how to do it.
You didn't look it up on Google, how does one start a charity?
It's a bit difficult because usually, right, this is not how patient bodies are normally formed. Patient bodies are usually formed by somebody's parent or doctor going, there isn't enough support for my loved one. I shall fix this. And off they go, and they gather a few other parents and they have a few small meetings about things they like to do. And the ramp up to the kind of organization that we have with Migraine Australia now is usually about closer to 10 years.
Yeah.
right? We've done it in basically 18 months. The volunteers of Migraine Australia should be incredibly proud of everything we've done, because this is a thriving organization. It's a very diverse organization. We've got people of color, we've got people who are LGBTIQ, we've got people from all over the country, we've got all different kinds of migraine, and we all work together as a fantastic team to both raise awareness of migraine and, you know, fight for our damn drugs. And the fight continues. I haven't forgot about everybody else on drugs other than Emgality, don't worry. So I will never forget about Aimovig. You know, like, it's a really quite inspiring thing. It took me a really long time to get used to the instability of it, because that's not what I'm used to, right? Political parties have the same people, they've been in the same jobs, they've been doing the same thing for a very long time. Every now and then some upstart comes along and thinks they can do it better, and the party machine just kind of minces them and chucks them back out. Because we are all so sick, you know, our volunteers churn at a much higher rate than what I am used to. And I used to panic about it. And, you know, we joke about this on the board, right? Everybody on the board's got bloody high level anxiety, like really, really high level anxiety. And it's just kind of the way that we're built. Yeah. Thanks, migraine. But, you know, I used to really worry about the fact that, you know, the volunteer coordinator isn't the volunteer coordinator 3 months later, because you don't have continuity and you don't have stability and yada, yada, yada. But I've now just kind of accepted that's part of the flow. Like, that's part of all being chronically ill, right? Yeah. Which is why we've tried to go to this model, which hasn't really kind of settled, of having 2 of everybody. We need to do that more. Like, we need kind of to have almost every role job shared, so that we can get to a point where there's always redundancy. Yeah. There's always somebody to back you up. There's always somebody that knows what's going on. And that might create a bit of inefficient work, in the sense that we've got people that are, you know, kind of across the same thing rather than spreading them out to do different things. But it means that it removes the anxiety. Yeah. So it's, you know, it's something to work towards. We need a lot more volunteers to do it. And we're going to expand the board and put a lot more board members on to kind of reduce particularly the workload of myself, Sarah and Jackie, so that we can get back to a slightly more manageable workload. So I think, you know, I think we have a really good organization. We have to stop and remember sometimes it's only really 18 months old.
And like, one of the reasons that I thought these interviews would be a good idea is because it kind of reinforces that, well, everyone who volunteers is sick. So if you are sick, you can still volunteer. Because like, when I was first like thinking about volunteering, I was like, oh, I'm probably going to be like too sick, I'm not reliable enough. But like, it's
fine. Oh, high anxiety.
I know. It's fine. Like, everyone,
yeah, look, it's completely fine.
We're all in the same boat. So yeah. The more people we have, the easier it is.
Look, the first time we have a Migraine Australia meeting where everybody shows up, I'm going to be shocked, because it just doesn't happen. I mean, occasionally we'll pull up a board meeting, but, you know, there's only been kind of 5 or 6 of us for a while. So, you know, it's a very different deal to kind of pulling off, like, say, an all ambassadors meeting or an all volunteers meeting. We never have more than 20 people on those calls, and it would be really great to get, you know, all 100 volunteers on a call. I think that would be just awesome, just to watch the Zoom screen alone. But you know, the reality is that on any given day, you know, probably 10 or 15% of the Migraine Australia volunteer workforce is down for the count, and that's okay. You know, we just have to make sure that our systems and our processes can deal with that, and then go and hire some very healthy staff. Preferably people with managed migraine, as opposed to people who have no earthly concept of what on earth we're talking about. Yeah, the day we get enough money to hire a CEO, I think I'm you know, I think I will breathe properly for the first time in a couple of years. Maybe sleep through the night. That'll be fun.
Yeah.
I'm not clear here. I'm not saying Migraine Australia stresses me out, right? I mean, it does sometimes, but it's just, this is the level of anxiety that I live with all the time.
Yeah.
I have generalized anxiety, I have PTSD, I have migraine related anxiety. The 3 of them combine and have a party most of the time. So yeah, it's just part of being me, really.
Yeah. Let's talk about your migraines. What type of migraine do you have and how does it affect your life?
I have brainstem and hemiplegic migraine,
Mm.
which for those who are new to this game, brainstem is the one that causes loss of consciousness and a whole bunch of other really scary, weird, strange symptoms. It's typically identified by a buzzing headache, mild headache at the back of the head, like right here. And it just kind of buzzes more than throbs. And hemiplegic migraine is almost stroke-like symptoms. So muscle weakness and numbness, usually down one side. Most of my attacks without Aimovig are hemiplegic. And I had not a single day off from migraine symptoms for 8 years before Aimovig. So I was kind of constantly numb, weak, required care, pretty bad, really. The brainstem attacks I would only get about once a month, maybe once every 6 weeks. They almost always required a trip to hospital because my heart slows down and I desaturate, right? My oxygen levels drop down to the 80s. So I need to be put on monitors and given additional oxygen until it passes. Joy.
You got the
So
fun ones.
yeah. Actually, the symptom that I hate the most is the loss of consciousness. So I've lost consciousness on a bus. I've lost consciousness walking down the street. I've lost consciousness, there's a photo actually my housemate took. I lost consciousness, but I was still sitting upright and, like I'd kind of grayed out if I can, like I decreased consciousness, but I hadn't completely passed out to the point you fall over. And I was sitting there like I was looking at the television, but I was just like in a catatonic state.
Yeah.
So he put like a scarf around me and a hat on my head and dressed me up. And he was just astonished that I just didn't respond to anything, took a photo of it, and then he kind of felt bad. So he took everything off and then he just sat there and looked at me until I kind of came around. And it was about maybe a minute and a half, right? It wasn't a really long time, but like he kind of went from this is funny to, oh my God, this is really serious. Should I call an ambulance? And as he was kind of sitting there pondering, should I call an ambulance? I kind of came to him and went, what are you doing? Like nothing happened.
Do you have like any warning when that happens, or would it just be like very sudden?
It used to be quite sudden. And I would often only not have warning of it, but I wouldn't know afterwards, except that I was perhaps in a different place.
Right.
So it was really scary. I once came to in my underwear, standing on the street outside my unit in Bondi Junction, which is a very busy road. And I had no idea how I got there, like just none.
Or how long you'd been out there.
In
like,
my underwear.
Am I sunburned? Like how long has this been going on?
So, like the kind of crazy that used to happen when I was really bad, it took me years to talk about some of those incidents. Like I was recently talking about, I got angry one day, not that long ago. Me get angry, I can't imagine that. And I was talking about need to access support like the NDIS or home care. And the person that I was talking to was kind of like, it's an episodic condition, blah, 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 you don't need, blah, 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 blah. And I just lost it. And I said, look, I didn't realize I needed care, that I needed help inside my home until I spent 3 days lying in my own shit and vomit, unable to get up. I don't ever want anybody to have to go through that. Particularly not then to be told it's a friggin' headache. So I think, some of those really quite severe incidents from 2013, 2014, when I was really bad, I didn't talk about until kind of 2018. Just because they were really full on and I was alone. And it's really difficult sometimes, when you're kind of carrying the whole migraine stigma to then kind of talk about the reality of what that actually means, when what that actually means is I really can't look after myself. And then along came Aimovig. Hi. It took 6 days. I had my first shot. 6 days later, I was crystal clear. And it took maybe 6 months until I got to 0 days. And then I stupidly stopped taking it. And I kind of went back to the beginning. So we're now kind of back to, what am I at for this month? I've had 4 migraine affected days this month. and my shot's due day after tomorrow. So that's bloody awesome.
Yeah.
You know, yeah, it kind of changed everything.
Mm.
And now I just can't afford it.
Yeah.
A new form of torture. Yeah.
Which I don't know. I feel like it's especially unfair because, like, with all the effort that you've put in, like, yes, we've got Emgality, but you're still kind of like you don't have the medication you need.
Yeah,
Anyway.
I'm actually going to ask for compassionate access. So
Mhm.
I never, I kind of resisted asking for compassionate access, because compassionate access is supposed to be for those people who are screwed 19 ways till Sunday, right?
Yeah.
My husband's got cancer, my son's mentally ill, and I'm his full-time carer, and I just need the drug so I can function and take care of all these people in my life, kind of, really, really hard up type scenarios. And Novartis, my contacts at Novartis have, encouraged me several times to ask for compassionate access. And after I went off it and saw how ugly I got so very fast, and I do apologize to everybody that I snapped at, yelled at, whatever in that period, because I was really ugly. I kind of went, no, I do actually need this drug. So I've paid for a couple more doses, but like I literally, I can't pay for the next one. I literally do not have the cash. The last dose, I got an advance on my GSP to buy it. So it's kind of, I really can't. So I have a neuros appointment in kind of 10 days. And I'm going to ask them to go and ask for compassionate access. If I have to go back to my dad and ask my dad to pay for my medication like I'm bloody 5, then I will. I'm not going off it again. I'm not going to go to Emgality. I mean, I probably should, but I'm not. I tried 1 dose of Emgality. It didn't do a thing. I should probably do the 2-dose loading, what have you. But given how bad I was the last time I came off Aimovig, I really just don't want to ever come off it again. Vyepti is tempting though. So Vyepti is the new one, that's the infusion. And everybody that's kind of been on that is kind of like, no, this is better than Aimovig. It's kind of like, so if there's like a PFP for Vyepti, then I'm going to be there, and I'm going to be first because I'll hear about it before everybody else does. Actually, no, Jackie's taking over that role. Jackie will hear first, but
Okay.
Definitely I'll be in there if there's a PFP. Although, given what happened with the other drugs, there may not be a PFP. They may not want to be hung out like that. So we'll see.
Yeah. What are your main triggers? Do you have any, or does it just kind of like come on?
No, I've got a heap. Dust is my worst trigger. So house dust. One of the things that I, when I kind of decided that I did need care is I have a home care cleaner come every week. They dust and vacuum everything every week. So I've got a 2-bedroom apartment, right? It's really small. You can clean the entire thing in 15 minutes, but they spend an hour getting rid of the dust.
Yeah.
And I kind of consider that as a base level healthcare need for me. I can't do it myself. If I pull the vacuum cleaner out, I'm done, right? Boom, instant attack, even on Aimovig. Pretty mild attack on Aimovig, but still. So I just consider that a basic health need. I've got a bunch of food triggers, particularly sesame and olive. And the other thing that really sets me off every single time is if I cry.
Yeah.
I can get angry. I can get, yell at people. I can get emotional in all kinds of ways. But if I cry, that's it. Bam, big attack.
Yeah. Well,
So I
try
don't
not to make you cry.
I have to be a hardened bitch. I just have to not cry at anything. It's really hard sometimes, right? You'll be at a funeral and you're like standing there all stoic.
Yeah.
Kind of trying not to think about these sad events that you're at. I don't watch sad movies. I just avoid crying.
Yeah, well, fair enough. At what age did you start experiencing migraine attacks, and when were you first diagnosed?
I first started experiencing migraine attacks when I was 22, but in hindsight, I recognized that I had symptoms all the way back to being a baby. So my mother often tells this story, lovely woman, my mother, that she would put me in a bath and throw cold water over my head because I wouldn't stop crying. Now, if you think about migraine and what we know now about colicky babies who won't stop crying, and that cooling them down with ice packs or maybe putting them in a cool bath can be helpful. As brutal as her approach was, it was probably the right thing to do. And so, so it's highly likely that that was all migraine. I had a lot of issues when I was a kid of losing continence, which I now understand to be a migraine symptom. That frequency of urination as it presents in adults can be incontinence in kids. Another topic we don't talk about as much as we should. And then I had my first hemiplegic attack when I was 22. But most of the first 10 years was all migraine aura without headache. So it didn't get diagnosed until I was 34.
So big gap.
It was mentioned as a possibility, but, you know, like they kind of were testing me for things like lupus and whatever. And I just kind of, you know, actually I thought I had MS for a really long time. And then I just got bored, right? Because, you know, like all that was happening is my arm was going numb. So I just, you know, I just didn't go back to the doctor. I was sick of all the poking and prodding, and it wasn't really doing anything. And I wasn't like, I didn't feel sick, right? Yeah. Just my arm was numb and it didn't work properly.
Do you have any treatments you'd recommend to trying aside from medication? And do you have any migraine resources like websites, books, or particular specialists you'd recommend to newly diagnosed people?
I'm a big fan of the aspirin bomb and Coke. I think everybody knows that. I drink far too much Coke. The other thing that I am a very big fan of is the ice pack on the back of the neck. They're all pretty well-known things. Probably my secret weapon that I don't really tell people about much is plain bread, lots of butter, and heaps of salt. Nothing else, salt. Don't ask me why.
Yeah, I eat a lot of like salt and sugar when I'm sick, and like being sick all the time, I'm like, I should maybe like watch my diet.
Look, I have long ago kind of accepted the idea that if your brain is telling you that you need salt, then give it salt. If your brain is telling you that it needs sugar, then give it sugar. If it's telling you that it needs water, give it water. Just, you know, it's not rocket science. Just what does your body tell you that you want? Don't fight it, just give it. In terms of blogs and stuff, I'm a big fan of Movement with Migraine, Emily Cordes' blog and Insta channel. As well as Joe Lau. Even though I don't do the yoga, I like to look at it. You know, maybe imagine doing some yoga one day. I've actually struggled quite a lot with the poor quality of a lot of migraine sites. So, you know, back in the early days, I was reading things like migraine.com and Migraine Again, and they're all, you know, they're perfectly fine, except, you know, in those early days, when you're struggling and you're just trying to relate to people and all the rest of it, but there's also a lot of misinformation or out of date information. So I kind of reached this point where I started reading academic literature instead of blogs. You will get there, right? On the migraine journey, you will get to a point where you only want the latest science and you want it now. So, you know, when putting together the Migraine Australia website, that's kind of, you know, the driving force behind it is to have really accurate information. So you'll see on there that we always link out to other websites like the Migraine Trust or to the American Migraine Foundation, or we will actually link to academic articles from time to time. And a lot of that is just trying to get to the latest information. And I, you know, I'm still on a bit of a journey. Like it's only recently that I've really embraced the language of a sensory dysfunction. A sensory processing dysfunction, which Peter Goadsby's been talking about for a while, right? And it's there in that, you know, kind of a lot of the very new articles about migraine. You know, when they do the bit in the academic paper where they explain what migraine is, instead of saying it's a neurological disorder, or it's a genetic neurological disorder, or it's, you know, a headache lasting 4 to 72 hours, which unfortunately still too many papers say, they're actually describing it as a sensory processing disorder. Because when you talk about it like that, when you think about it like that, and even on my own journal, this is new, it really does change the way that you think about everything migraine. I've been saying for a while, right, that the whole debate about whether or not you should call migraine, you know, a chronic disease or a disability is kind of a bit mute, because it's a genetic disorder, therefore it is a disability out of the gate, regardless of whether you feel disabled by it or not, right? It's not, like, it's not just a chronic illness. And I've been there for a while, but taking that extra step to understanding it as a sensory processing disorder, that is that our brains are hyperreactive, which I've been there for a while. But what's actually going on is that we're not processing sensory inputs in the same way. So we process sensory inputs in a hyperexcitable way. Sensors overcharge our brain, and our brain goes too fast. That's actually what migraine is. It's that light, noise, whatever comes in, brain goes, woo, instead of, oh yeah, cool. So that understanding that really does put it over well and truly into the disability column. It aligns us with the other sensory processing disorders, right? So there is actually one that's called sensory processing disability or something, or disorder. But it's got a slightly different brain mechanism from what I've read. I don't really understand this stuff. We will be having a couple more conversations about this through Migraine Awareness Month. Stay tuned. But that's, it really does change the way that you think about it. And when you get there, right, and it is a process, you do have to get there. If you're sitting there watching this going, no, that's crap. No, it's just a headache. That's fine. That's where you are on your migraine journey. This is where I am on my migraine journey. Both of those things are completely fine. But when you get there, when you get to the point of this is a disability, and these symptoms that I experience, as bad as they are just, symptoms of when I've overdone it, when I've, not been able to manage all my triggers, when medication couldn't stop me. It takes away a lot of the guilt. It takes away a lot of the anxiety. But when you start thinking about migraine as this sensory processing disorder and migraine attacks as symptoms, it really does help you manage it, because you can actually separate those two things. And it's totally okay for migraine to be part of your identity and not the thing that disables you. Because the thing that disables you is the symptoms. It's not the disorder. There's actually cool things about migraine.
Like what?
We all have fast brains, right? So at its most basic level, what happens when you have a fast brain? We adapt faster, we learn faster, right? For a very, very, very long time, it was assumed that people with migraine were people with high IQs. But they kind of debunked that, but they didn't debunk the fact that we learn faster. So we tend to do better in school. We annoy the crap out of our teachers because we've got everything done in 5 minutes, but that's, the fun of having a migraine brain. A lot of us talk quite fast, so we can communicate very clearly. We get our heads around complex issues and ideas and communicate it clearly. Most people with migraine have an interest in detail. Sometimes that can go bad, right? If you're heading towards the OCD level of obsession about detail.
I think there's a lot of people here that are like perfectionists, and that can get in the road.
Yep. But that's a function of the migraine brain. Because our brain is working faster, we can see all of the details. We don't miss stuff. We don't necessarily lose sight of the big picture while still getting the details. That makes you a bloody great employee in anybody's language. Because, that's generally what people are looking for. If they're looking for people who can get the detail right while not losing sight of what it is that they're working on. Now, obviously, migraine spectrum. So the extent to which you will have these superpower abilities. And it might be that you have a really strong sense of smell, or you can see better than other people. Mine is hearing. So something that I didn't realize until fairly recently is I actually hear quite differently to other people. I hear sound in kind of multi-level harmonics. So the only way I can explain it is, like you've ever seen an audio program and it's got like all of the different channels, right? And
I haven't, but I'm sure someone knows what you're talking about.
When you mix audio, right, you can put all these different channels together to make, like a song or something. And you'll have the bass on this line, you have the treble on another line, you'll have the drums on this line, and you'll have a guitar on this line and a voice on another line. I hear all of those different sounds all of the time, like they're on separate channels. So if I'm watching television, right, I'll be able to hear the background noise quite separately to the actors talking, quite separately to any music that's there, as well as whatever the dog's doing, as well as whatever the neighbors are doing, as well as what 3 doors down are doing, as though they're kind of separate inputs. And I can tune into one or the other, or listen to all of them simultaneously, as much as I want to, and I can turn that on and off. I didn't realize other people couldn't do that until maybe only 2 years ago.
It's like hearing. Maybe I'm doing the same thing.
So I can be on a conversation like with you, and my head will suddenly tune into the fact that the dogs next door have started barking, and I'm now wondering where Brinny is, because usually she's gone off to see what they're barking at, right? But my brain can do that without losing track of the conversation that I'm having with you, and apparently normal people can't do that.
They can only focus on one thing at a time.
I can hear all of those things simultaneously and really quite distinguish sound. Now, why that's interesting to me and fascinating to me, and one of the things that I've kind of really loved, or grown to love about having a migraine brain, is that when I was in my 20s and I was working in radio, I was really good at it. And one of the reasons I was really good at it is I could listen to 5 or 6 things simultaneously and be able to think kind of ahead faster than other people. So I might be on the phone talking to a caller and I'm listening to the song that's playing now and the song's about to play next, and maybe something else, and somebody yelling at me, and I didn't have a problem with all of that. I could listen to all of that quite simultaneously. And I was really, really good at it. I now understand that was a migraine superpower, and that all of my colleagues weren't doing the same. So there are good things. We need more research on the good things.
Yeah.
Rather than me just anecdotally kind of coming up with all this stuff. But, like one of the things that I've really enjoyed about working with Migraine Australia is that so many of us talk fast that I don't have to slow down. And I know that kind of, it probably sounds a bit superficial, but I've worked most of my life to slow down the speed at which I speak. I started in radio at 16 and I spoke so fast that nobody could understand me. And there's a lifetime of training and condition to get me to talk at this speed. And one of the things that I love about Migraine Australia meetings is you can all talk at 100 miles an hour and everybody's fine.
Yeah.
And that's kind of, I think the joy of migraine community is we don't have to hide from each other. We don't have to pretend to be normal. In whatever way we are different. If you do have a Scooby-Doo nose and you can smell the off fish in the bottom of the fridge when everybody else says there's nothing, embrace it, work with it, enjoy it. I'm not entirely sure how that can be an employable skill, but work on it. Maybe a wine taster.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah, wine tasting or something. If there was something you could tell your younger self, early or pre-diagnosis, what would it be?
Ooh, have babies early, like at 18. I think it's one of the things that will always be a sorrow in my life is that I don't have kids, and I won't have kids. I'm 44 now. But I lost all of my 30s to migraine. Yeah. And I didn't think in my 20s that I wouldn't have my 30s. Yeah. So if I could tell myself one thing, breed now. You want your kids to be old enough to be able to look after you when your 30s kick in, or at least look after themselves. Go feed yourself, children. Family's always been a very big part of my life, and I have one of those quite large families. I know all of my cousins and stuff, and I love them all to bits. But when you can't continue on that family breeding legacy, and almost everybody in your family has bred, of your generation, it becomes even more isolating, because I just can't talk to them. They're talking about the kids, and I love my nieces and nephews, and my cousins' kids are great as well, but I can't have a conversation with them. Their lives just don't relate to mine at all.
Yeah. Did you ever, I don't know, because whenever I thought of me, I never wanted kids in the first place, but I was always if I did want kids, I'd adopt. Did you ever consider, were you adopting, or did you want biological kids?
Yeah, no, I applied to be a foster parent and I was too sick.
Oh, yeah. We'll move on to something else. This is
that
sad.
Might be different now with Aimovig. But because I'm not married. If I was married, it would be different, because they would have done it on both of us, and presumably, I wouldn't marry somebody that was also chronically ill. But it might be. You don't control who you fall in love with. Yeah, no, I applied to be a foster parent twice.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was rejected both times
Mm.
in different systems and different states where they had different rules. But so
Yeah.
yeah, breed early.
Breed early.
Breed before you get debilitated. If you want to adopt, then do it early before you get debilitated.
I don't know. I have like, I'm not sure whether to say or not. I have a slightly controversial opinion, I guess, because
Okay. Tell
I
me your
don't know.
controversial opinion.
I know, like, especially because a lot of the people in the group are women. It's like I have no say in this. I need to step back. But like, if migraine is genetic, I mean, I don't really understand then, especially when people are really sick, the like still wanting biological kids. Because I actually said to my parents, like, if either of them had have had migraine and knew it was genetic and passed it on to me, I'm not sure I would forgive that. Like, because I mean, I understand like some people, they don't get sick until like later in life, but I kind of grew up with it being a big thing all throughout my childhood. Like I was just never well. So I don't know. That's just, I guess.
Look, my particular type of migraine is one of the ones where there is a very specific gene. So the option was always there for me to have like genetic screening and make sure that the SCNA1 gene mutation wasn't passed on. I totally understand where you're coming from. I think it's a reasonable discussion for anybody with migraine to have that discussion. But I also kind of came back to the thing of, well, you know, an adopted kid or a foster kid is no less likely to have migraine because it's so prevalent. I mean, obviously there's a level of guilt in passing any kind of genetic defect on. I blame my mother for my allergies. You know, the migraine came from my dad's side, but I got just as much from my mum's side. So I think it's, you know, it's an interesting discussion. I would like to have genetic counseling, you know, as kind of one of the things that, you know, everybody with migraine does. But we have to kind of first identify all the genes. And then there will always be people that don't care, or, you know, that biological drive and the biological clock is really quite annoying. Let me tell you. You know, that it overrides, and you kind of go, well, you know, 50% chance, here we go, flip the dice.
Yeah, which is still fair.
Coins, dice, something. Roll the dice, flip the coins. That was a migraine moment.
Do a gamble. I know you have a pet. How does Brinny, or is it Brinny? Brinny. How does Brinny react? Does she like change like behavior when you're sick? Does she seem to know?
Oh, she knows. She knows before I do. She comes up and snuggles, and she kind of does this thing where she kind of puts her head down really low and she puts one paw up. And she just kind of looks at me like there's something really wrong, and then she just won't leave my side.
Has she ever done that and you've been fine and you're just like, what are you going on about?
Oh yeah, plenty of times. And then like 20 minutes later, I'm in trouble. It's like, okay. So I was actually going to train her up as a migraine dog, and I think she would have been great, except she's too excitable. She, you know, if there's kids or other dogs around, she just, you know, completely loses focus, wags her tail at 100 mile an hour and rolls over on her back to say, love me, love me. So, you know, she's just going to be a pet rather than the proper assistance dog she's supposed to be. Yeah, I'll still call her an assistance dog every time I apply for a home. But you know, the rental application, yes, this is a medical assistance dog.
Unnecessary addition.
That was the intention. She might settle down. She's only just turned 2. So we'll see. Maybe she'll settle down and she can be a bit more trainable. But at the moment, any side of it, particularly kind of, you know, 5 to 10-year-old kids, she just thinks they're awesome. And she will bound from one side of the dog park to the other to go and say hello to the kid. Which is cute, except that if you're a kid and you see this big black dog running for you at a million miles an hour, it's pretty scary. She never jumps up on them or anything. She just kind of sniffs them and licks them. But I think she likes that they're the right height to hug her. And she's kind of figured out that they give good hugs. So yeah, I love her. She's great.
Yeah. Now I got one question left, which I suspect you spend too much time on Migraine Australia, but do you have any interesting hobbies? Do you have any time left over after all the Migraine Australia work? Do you have hobbies?
I play Fortnite,
Oh, yep, nice.
which I've talked about before. I actually use it to manage my migraine.
Mm.
I play too much Fortnite. The only other thing I do is sew, but I'm a crappy sewer. I sew for love. I sew for fun. I don't sew for function. So I tend to do things like I make a lot of skirts in particular, which is, I mean, I did textiles and design at high school, right? That's where I learned to sew. And my grandmother was a seamstress. But I am really crappy because I make the garment, right? And I've got like 8 garments sitting in my sewing box. And the only thing I haven't done is the hems. I hate hemming. So I've got a formal dress and about 6 skirts sitting in the box, and all they need to be is hemmed, and they've been there for about 3 years.
Mm-hmm. And then when you want to wear them, it's like, well, I don't have time to hem it now. I'm leaving.
Oh, they wouldn't fit anymore either. I put on so much bloody weight.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a thing that I do. I don't finish stuff.
Yeah.
Which my mother would tell you that I didn't finish anything at all. I got him Galley listed. I finished that. Mind you, I tried to quit Migraine Australia so many times.
Yeah.
This is kind of one of the things that you guys don't see, right? Is that because of my anxiety level, I flip out all the time and I want to quit and I want to have nothing to do with Migraine Australia. And I get over it. But you kind of have to get used to the fact that I need breaks every now and then, just to reset. And then I'm like, I'm okay again. But it's one of the reasons why I don't want to be the chair.
Yeah.
My anxiety levels are too high. I am very good at other things, but I find that Migraine Australia is too emotional for me. It's too close. And I can go and work on something political or, a different issue and not care and not have any emotion. But I rise and fall with what happens with Migraine Australia. And it's the whole I don't want to cry thing, right? When I can assure you, when Amy Big was pulled from the PBS, I sat and cried. Like, even though I was kind of doing my thing of communicating to everybody, and I knew a week before everybody else, right? The Novartis guys flew up to Townsville, that's where I was at the time, to brief me on, what they were planning to do and why they were planning to pull out and all the rest of it, so that when that news went public, we were able to kind of hit everybody with really good communications. But I cried a lot. And of course, then I got very sick. So yeah, I love this organization, but I need somebody else to run it so that I can jump in and out.
Yeah, which is like fair, because like we don't want you burning out. You kind of like, yes, there's like lots of volunteers that run it, but I think you have like some very unique skills. Like you're very good at kind of interacting with the political side of it, and you're very good at like reading the medical articles. I mean, most of us can't sit down and like focus. Like we've got about a 5-minute attention span, and then like to actually go and advocate for ourselves, like as you said, we've all kind of got anxiety, so we don't like, even when like the first time I like emailed my like local member of parliament, I was nervous about that. So there's no way like most of us could do like what you've done. And you also
just pick up the phone in the minister's office and go, what the hell?
like you're very good at taking like the complicated topics and dumbing it down and being right, there's a new medication, there's this thing called the PBS, and then another thing called the PBAC, and this is the situation, guys. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So we're very lucky to have you.
I think it's probably like, I think there's other people that can talk to government and there's other people that can read medical stuff. I think that, the only thing that I can do that's a little bit different is pull it all together in a way that large numbers of people can understand and follow. And that's, it's not really that special. I've just been doing it for a really long time. This is what I do. And even in my business, which I have now set up again, now that I have finished my PhD and I'm officially Dr. Crosby, thank you. I've kind of very specifically narrowed its focus to only working with social good organizations. And I really just want to do the research because I like doing research. I'll do some comms and stuff, but it's really about being able to mobilize people and understand people. That's just a bit unusual. There aren't a lot of us around. I'm happy that I can do what I can for Migraine Australia. As long as somebody else is the chair, I'm great.
Mm. Well, like, I think, like, as terrible a time as like you had when, because like with your very severe type of migraine
Mm.
before, like, because you went through like a big period where it sounds like you didn't really have that community and that support and
I
someone to
didn't.
kind of
No.
tell you like, this is what you do, this is how you apply for disability. I rewatched that disability support pension video the other day. It was very good.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, so I guess maybe there's some comfort for you there, that there's going to be people that have joined Migraine Australia that are probably at that point where you first were, that you've helped, so that people don't have to kind of go through that same experience that you've went through.
Yeah. And I think, one thing that I do want from the organization is for us to kind of get to the point that we're connecting with people long before, they slide into debilitated. So that, back when they're only getting, maybe one migraine attack a month, that they're fully briefed on what it is that's causing those symptoms, that they understand and associate with migraine as a concept, migraine as a community. And that when they do start to slide, and unfortunately hormones, you're going to slide, when that does kind of happen and they start to get more frequent attacks and more severe attacks, that they're actually already skilled up. They know what's coming. They know what to do next. They know they need to go to a neurologist. They know they need to ask about the new drugs, or they need to try the old drugs first, or whatever. But they know that this is what you do. Just even to have that information,
Or like know where to find it. Like, you're not
yeah.
just going through Google, you've got like the website kind of, and even just like the sources and like lives that have been done. There's a lot of information.
Yeah, and they can join the group and they can talk to other people who get it. I think for me, I didn't realize how lonely I was until the Migraine Australia community came together. And it's such a beautiful community. I love it. And I think a lot of people have that kind of response. There's a few people that bounce out of the group, and I always kind of, like they join and then they have like one interaction and they kind of go, nah, and they leave. And I always kind of wonder about that, whether we're, what it is about the group. But, again, that's just the anxiety of, this little person joined the group and then they left. They didn't want to play with my 4,000 friends.
We lost a soldier.
But oftentimes it's just that they're not used to the intensity of the group, or they're not used to the way that we talk about migraine. So most of the people that bounce out actually don't have migraine. They've just been misusing the word, right? So they've landed in here with all these hardened migraine warriors that understand their condition, and they're like, yeah, that's not migraine. And they're like, yes, it is. Don't you tell me what migraine is.
Yeah.
And that's fine. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's totally okay. That's going to happen. It's a bit like, we're going to have volunteer churn. It's going to happen. I just have to, be a little less anxious about all these things and not worry about the one that didn't want to play with the 5,000. My goal for Migraine Awareness Month is to get us to 10,000. I think that would be awesome. I'm not sure it's going to happen, but, goals, aims, work on stuff.
Yeah.
Any more questions in your interrogation, Flynn?
No, that's it. That's the end of the interrogation. Thank you very much for participating, Dr. Crosby.
Thank you very much, Flynn. Happy Migraine Awareness Month.
Yeah, lovely talking to you and getting to know about your migraine experience a bit more.
Thank you.